Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying all the sessions we have arranged for you since yesterday. If you have missed any of them, you can watch the recorded one on this platform itself. A warm welcome to the EarthID Workshop. Let me begin with a brief introduction of EarthID and the members who would be conducting this workshop for you. EarthID is an award-winning decentralized identity platform that allows secure and frictionless exchange and verification of identity information. EarthID helps organizations reduce identity frauds and the associated cost by empowering users with data ownership, privacy, and consent. The purpose of this workshop helps startups and developers to understand the benefit of EarthID and how they can integrate to solve some of their business and technical challenges. If you have watched the identity session, you must have met Shiv Agrawal. He is the founder and CEO of EarthID. Shiv has over 18 years of technology industry experience as a certified enterprise architect and has been instrumental to the success of many strategic and digital transformation initiatives for global brands. Next, we have Rahul Asati. He's a chief architect at EarthID. Rahul is an expert at building and driving software products in diversified industries. He's an award-winning Hashgraph ambassador and seasoned architect with a deep understanding of various technology platforms and domains. I welcome you both and over to you further. Please let startups know more about EarthID in this workshop. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Hello, everyone. As Monica mentioned, I'm Shiv Agrawal. I'm here to talk about EarthID, which is a decentralized identity platform. We would be covering different aspects with respect to what decentralized identity is, what EarthID is, what are the different use cases, what the platform is all about, the technology underneath, and then how you can use it basically for your own different purposes, right? And we are happy to address any questions that you may have. So let's begin. So let's talk about the introduction to decentralized identity first, right? Because if we look at the digital identity as a concept, right? So it's massive. Every human being on the planet basically needs some sort of identity to interact with service providers, to interact with other individuals so that they can first establish the trust before any specific transaction or interaction can start, right? And I think all of us basically, we understand what digital identity can do for us. Obviously, one very big example of digital identity is Aadhaar. So Aadhaar basically, with Aadhaar program, government of India was able to provide a digital identity to more than 1 billion citizens. And then they were able to basically drive social and financial inclusion by providing access to finance, insurance, so on and so forth, right? So we know that what the power of digital identity is, but then it also comes with its own challenges with respect to privacy, with respect to cyber frauds, and so on and so forth. So this is where let's look at why decentralized identity is important. So in the current model, basically we know that there are two types of identities that exist: centralized and federated. So most of the government issued identities, they are centralized. So Aadhaar is centralized, SSN is centralized, and most of the national ID programs, they are centralized, right? So they are issued by a central organization and it's governed by a central organization, and the data storage is also centralized. Then the concept of federated identity came in, which is basically more in tune with corporates, where basically corporates establish their partner ecosystems, and one identity issued by an organization can be used within the ecosystem. We have certain examples like Facebook ID, Google ID, which are basically new with respect to, I think, the advent of social media. But the concept remains the same, right? That the identity is issued by one organization, but that can be used across different ecosystems. Again, the problem is it's also centralized. It's managed by a single organization, and then it can be taken away also, right? And this is where to tackle all these challenges with respect to, I think, the different centralized models with respect to data hacking, data breaches, identity frauds. The new model that we're talking about here is like the decentralized identity. The decentralized identity is also, some people call it self-sovereign identity. The key takeaway, it's about the data ownership, it's about privacy, and it's about consent. So it's a user-centered identity which can be used for various different purposes. So it's a multi-purpose, reusable, interoperable identity, which is basically owned, controlled, and managed by an individual, and it can be used across different ecosystems. If you look at how does it work, right? So obviously we understand how a normal identity works. So I might have a driving license, I might have a passport, and I'm able to basically carry it with myself, and then I'm able to show it to different people, right? But the problem is that it's binary, right? So either I can show it to someone or I don't show it to someone, right? There's no concept of selective data disclosure. So there's a challenge to privacy. When we talk about decentralized identity, the way it works is that the user owns and manages their identity information or credentials using an identity wallet. The identity wallet as a concept is that it's a private space which is owned and managed by an individual, and this individual could be an organization, it could be an individual, it could be an organization, or it could be even smart devices. So it's about the subject of the identity. But for this presentation, let's focus on individuals. So an individual basically would have a wallet, which could be on a mobile device, it could be in the cloud, it could be on the hardware. We also have technology where you can basically have it on a piece of paper. But yes, so there's a private space where you can basically own and manage your identity related information. And this basically, using this wallet, you are able to basically interact with different service providers. When I say service providers, they could be government, they could be educational institutes, they could be corporates, they could be healthcare organizations, so on and so forth. And what happens is that all these organizations are going to basically interact with my wallet in terms of privacy and consent, right? So what this means is that, for example, let's say if I talk about a university, so they would basically issue my university certificate directly to my wallet, right? So my identity wallet. And then I would be able to take that information and I would be able to share that information, let's say, with a prospective employer for gaining employment. And this continues, right? So in my wallet, I'm basically capturing information from different issuers. For example, my national IDs, my driving licenses, my educational credentials, my professional credentials, my healthcare data. All that data gets accumulated in my wallet, and I am able to basically share this information in a very selective data disclosure fashion with different service providers, so that they can provide me access to different services that I need. Now coming to EarthID, right? So EarthID is an award-winning decentralized identity platform, which basically builds on the concept of SSI and decentralized identity. So EarthID is an award-winning decentralized identity platform that allows secure and frictionless exchange and verification of identity information. And we do basically, we focus on organizations and individuals, right? So EarthID helps organizations reduce identity frauds, optimize costs, and drive sustainability while empowering users with data ownership and privacy and consent. So our model is B2B, right? So we want to basically help organizations to sort of manage their identity related needs in a very secure, seamless, and frictionless manner. And while we are doing this, we are also basically empowering users with data ownership, privacy, and consent. So we have created a self-sovereign identity model, which is beneficial for both organizations as well as individuals. And one of our key missions is to basically enable frictionless adoption of Web3 and a Metaverse-based ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, for Web3 and Metaverse to succeed, digital identity is going to play a strong role, because that is how the individuals would be able to interact with these new ecosystems in a very privacy and consent-oriented manner. And some of the things, basically, as I mentioned, right? So it's about basically how organizations can improve efficiencies and and drive cost savings. It's also about basically how do they build trust in businesses, because right now, if you look at this, most of we have seen so many data breaches or identity frauds happening on all the major platforms, that there's a lack of trust between the businesses and their customers, right? So it's about how do businesses drive trust using this new technology. And then it's also about user experience, right? One thing that we have realized is that even if you talk about Web2, Web3, or Metaverse, the lack of user experience is a major challenge. Most of the times it's very cumbersome. We can also talk about how we how we basically do a KYC with a bank, right? How do we, when we get employment, how our digital onboarding happens. So there's a massive friction with respect to how customers are being onboarded and how they get access to different services. So that is where we have a strong focus on user experience. And lastly, it's about sustainability, right? Because right now there's a lot of paper involved in identity related processes. We basically take a lot of photocopies, we share those photocopies for a lot of various different purposes, and then that is where the fraud happens. But then it also has it has an impact on the environment as well. So it's about how do you optimize your processes, how do you become paperless, and how do you drive sustainability. Moving on, and when we look at the key drivers, the key solution drivers of EarthID, right? So one is, first of all, digitization, right? So it's about basically using latest emerging technologies to drive digital transformation. Then it's about decentralization. And so I think most of us would know what decentralization is, right? We know what Bitcoin can do, what blockchains can do, and that is where basically it's about how do you drive digital transformation using decentralization. And lastly, it's about security. When I say security, it's about cyber security, it's about data protection, and it's about privacy and compliance. So these are the three key pillars on which basically the EarthID solution is built on. Now, when we look at the platform, so I'll come to more details in the subsequent slides, but when we look at the key features, right? So obviously we are talking about a decentralized identity. We are talking about digital wallets. So when I say digital wallet, so basically we have mobile-based wallet, both iOS and Android. We are in the process of building cloud wallet. We also have a technology where you can sort of encode some of your information and print it on a piece of paper, so make it more portable. So digital wallets, right now the focus is on identity data and credentials, but eventually we are looking at basically how do we create a Web3 focused wallet where every individual would be able to have a wallet and they would be able to basically manage their ID, manage their data, manage their assets, and maybe even make payments. So basically it's like a true Web3 wallet, but that is what the roadmap is. Obviously, we are also talking about verifiable credentials, which is a W3C standard for digital credentials. So instead of basically issuing paper-based certificates or credentials, you can basically issue digital credentials, which are basically W3C compliant, which are interoperable, which are tamper-proof, and they can be basically used for various different purposes. You can talk about university certificates, you can talk about employment certificates, you can talk about licenses, and so on and so forth, right? And then eventually, I think we also basically integrate with multi-model biometrics, in the sense like we provide face, finger, and other biometric technology, so that the overall platform is very, very secure. And then it also basically enhances the user experience. We are also experimenting with other new technologies like voice biometrics, so that we can make sure that we can add more modalities and make the platform more suitable for various different reasons, even let's say for defense. Then the other thing is like the key thing is selective data disclosure, right? Because in a lot of use cases, we need to decide how much data is actually needed for driving a specific use case. For example, let's say if I'm trying to go to a bar to buy a drink, I need to prove that I'm an adult, right? Secondly, I think if I'm trying to basically travel, I need to prove that I'm a citizen of a respective country. Or if I'm trying to apply for a loan, I need to prove that my income is more than a certain number, right? So all those things, all those claims that I make during the course of my life, I should be able to basically make those without sharing a lot of information about myself. And lastly, passwordless login, right? Because a lot of data breaches or frauds happen because of weak and stolen passwords. So we are using the same wallet technology and the decentralized identity technology to create a model where you don't need a password. You don't need a user ID and a password to basically authenticate yourself before accessing any online services. So these are some of the features of EarthID platform. And then just to basically sort of talk about what we have achieved or what we are working on, and also sort of give you examples of the use cases, right, that EarthID enables. Because the way we are look at ourselves is like we want to basically see ourselves as platforms, and we want to basically work with enterprises, governments, and innovative SMEs to enable them to solve specific business challenges. So we provide the infrastructure, and then our customers and our partners can solve different business problems which are they closer to. So obviously, I think one of the key ones is the digital identity, right? So it's about how do you issue a digital identity which is basically secure, which is frictionless, and it could be for citizens, it could be for employees, and it could be for students. And then it's also about digital onboarding and KYC. So we have seen, right, right? That it's very cumbersome when we talk about onboarding of customers or employees. And then also I think it's about KYC, right? So banking industry has to do the KYC, which is very costly and a time consuming solution. So this is where we are able to basically create a solution which is frictionless, which provides frictionless onboarding of customers and users. And we also basically enable reusable KYC. So in the last panel discussion that happened, we were talking about how EarthID solution can be used for providing a reusable KYC, which could be intra-bank and interbank, right? So that is what we enable. And then it's about licenses and certificates, right? So how do you use verifiable credentials for issuing tamper-proof and paperless credentials? We are also working with telecom, healthcare, and various other sectors to basically enable certain use cases which are in line with the digital identity and cybersecurity use cases. We have done some work in agriculture space as well, where it was about how we work with the Indian government, where we sort of showcased how this technology can be used to onboard demarginalized farmers so that they can basically get access to the value the value and the support the government wants to provide them. And we have a very strong focus on Web3 and Metaverse, as I mentioned in the previous slide also, that Web3 and the digital identity is going to play a very strong role in terms of driving adoption of Web3 and Metaverse. And we have a lot of use cases, including passwordless, including wallets, and including interoperability. And lastly, we are also working on smart cities, where it's about how do you basically look at providing both digital and physical access to citizens and visitors. And also it's eventually it's also about how do you take care of connected devices, right? Because now we are living in a world where everything is connected. We have a lot of smart devices in our houses, in our offices, and in our factories. So that is where it's about how do you basically take the same technology, extend it, and to sort of apply it to IoT ecosystem as well. So these are some of the use cases, but there are many more, right? Because digital identity, as a matter of fact, it's basically a cross-cutting concern. Every organization, every government, every industry needs digital identity solution to sort of enable their customers, their users, their stakeholders. And I'm actually happy to basically engage some of you who might be working on a totally different use case. For example, like CVs, verifiable CVs, and so on and so forth, right? So I think it would be interesting to understand what others are working on and how can we enable EarthID can enable to solve those solution problems more effectively. Moving forward, so EarthID is a globally recognized organization. We have won a few awards. We are regularly covered by global media, and this is because we are solving the problem of digital identity in a very responsible manner. Now let's talk about the platform as a whole, right? So what is EarthID platform? So when we talk about EarthID, one of the key focuses is to basically build trust and remove friction. So that is what we are looking at doing, right? Because what we have established is when we talk about digital identity, while digital identity drives social and financial inclusion, it also creates problems with respect to cybersecurity frauds, right, and cybersecurity threats. So this is where it's about how do you use EarthID solution to cater to some of those challenges. Now, EarthID has a few layers, right? So it has a few components. So one of the components is the user wallet, right? And the user wallet could be on, as I mentioned, it could be on the mobile device. It could be an iOS or an Android app, or a decentralized app for that matter. It could be a web app, or it could be even basically it could be a cloud app which can be accessible from anywhere, right? And what is the purpose of the wallet, right? So it's about basically it's a decentralized storage of the data. And then it's also about how are you it's the user interface which allows the user to do consent management, do selective data disclosure, to enable zero knowledge proofs, and also enable private interaction. So it's the user interface through which a user is managing their identity data and sharing that with various different service providers on need basis. The second layer is basically with respect to the credentials issuance and verification, because if you look at any digital identity, there are three stakeholders, right? One is the issuer, which is issuing that particular credentials or an identity. For example, Aadhaar, Government of India is basically the issuer. and then the user, which is the subject, and lastly it's the verifier, for example a bank, which is going to basically verify your Aadhaar before they open a bank account for you. So this layer is about the issuer and the verifier, and we provide APIs so that different organizations can integrate with us to sort of issue credentials to individuals, and organizations can also basically verify these credentials, right? So it's about how do you establish secure connections between these three stakeholders so that the information can be exchanged and verified. And one of the key aspects here is that we talk about reusable identity, right? So when we talk about standard digital onboarding or digital identity solutions, more or less they are trying to improve the efficiency, but they are still very, very repetitive processes. For example, if I use a solution like Onfido or Zoomio, which are providing digital onboarding solutions to banks and other types of organizations, my identity would get verified every time I try to interact with a different with a different department or a different organization, right? But in this model, basically, you are creating a reusable identity which gets verified once, and it can be shared n number of times. So it basically takes the efficiency to the next level. And then lastly, basically the trust fabric, right? So this is where basically we use Hedera Hashgraph as the distributed ledger, and this is where basically it's about credential sharing, it's about audit and trace, and it's about revocation registry, because this is where this creates a loosely coupled communication mechanism between the issuer and verifier with respect to the identity and credentials of an individual, right? But one key aspect is that no PII information is stored on this particular layer. We only talk about basically the transactional information and basically the revocation registry. So for example, let's say if an organization issues me a credential, they have this authority to basically revoke that, right? But let's say if I have a paper-based certificate, then I can still take it and still try to sort of use it for various purposes, right? And then the verifier has no way of sort of verifying whether this is still valid or not. But with this solution, the issuer can basically mark the certificate as the credential as revoked on the ledger, and the verifier would be able to basically verify that on the fly. So these are some of the different layers, and each layer has a specific purpose to it. Moving on. Now, when we look at how we are, so the last slide talked about basically the different layers with respect to the platform, but let's look at how it works in the real life, right? So obviously we have a user wallet, and the user wallet could be, don't focus on the mobile wallet, but obviously there are other forms of wallet as well. But the user is basically downloading that wallet, and they are sort of registering themselves with respect to adding their biometric information, and they can also add their existing ID documents. Because if you think about this, while we are moving towards SSI or decentralized identity, and we are asking issuers to directly issue the ID and credentials to the user wallet, but we still have some existing identity, right? So I have my passport, I have my driving license, I have SSN, I have Aadhaar. What do I do with these things? And most of the organizations are actually currently using them. These are the accepted forms of identities for various things, right? So I cannot just discard them. Obviously, there's a evolution, right? And that is where EarthID provides a mechanism through which the users can digitize their existing identity document. So they can scan their passport, they can scan their driving license, and then our software verifies this information with respect to validity, authenticity, tampering, ownership, and we do a liveness check to ensure that basically this user is a living human being, and they are basically adding an authentic piece of information to their respective wallets. So, and then we support this across 200 countries. So a user can be in any part of the world, and they are able to download EarthID wallet, and they are able to basically register themselves. And once this process has been completed, then the issuers, different types of issuers can issue different IDs and credentials to this individual directly to their user wallet. And what also happens is like these transactions are also getting recorded on the ledger. In our case, it's Hedera Hashgraph. Then what happens is like now the user is able to basically share this information, right? Because obviously all this information is getting added to their wallet. And what we also do is like we break down everything into individual attributes. So you can imagine, you can sort of relate this as like tokenization of identity, right? So you are sort of breaking down different informations into individual attributes and sort of so that the user has more granularity in terms of what they are sharing with whom. And then what they can do is like they can share this information with requesting parties as verifiable credentials. They can do selective disclosures. They can do zero knowledge proof. They can also share certain self-attested information. And we also have a technology called cryptograph, where you can sort of encode some information about you, which is already residing in the wallet, and then you can print it on a piece of paper, and then you can sort of make it portable, and then you can use it in low-tech scenarios. For example, let's say refugee camps. There, if you want to issue identities to people who are living in the refugee camps, you can do that using this technology, and then those people would have a paper which can be basically scanned by different service providers and provide them the right level of support. And obviously, I think these things can be shared in various modes, right? So you can basically either email, you can use different messaging platforms, you can scan a QR code, or you can do facial recognition. So there are a lot of different ways of sort of sharing this information with the service providers. And I mentioned a customer ecosystem because since our model is B2B, an organization is going to adopt the solution, and they are going to basically use this for their respective consumers. And what they can also do is, like, on back of this, they can also issue identities or credentials to this respective individual, and they can also use this technology for basically creating new rewards and loyalty programs. So this is where, once this solution has been adopted, there are various use cases that can be enabled. And from an innovative startup point of view, right? For example, let's say if you are solving the problem with respect to DeFi, so obviously you can use this platform as your underlying infrastructure, and then you can build respective use cases with respect to DeFi, with respect to Web3, or with respect to Metaverse, and then we are sort of providing that basic infrastructure with respect to a digital or a decentralized identity. Moving on. Now, when we look at the benefits, right, because I think we need to understand why this is beneficial, right? And obviously that is where we would want to move to this particular path. So from a user standpoint, right, this identity is portable. So I can basically take this identity, I can port it to different devices. I can port it to different channels. So I can have this identity on my phone. I can have this identity in the cloud. I can have this identity in the future. For example, it could be in a dongle, right? And then you can also basically print it on a piece of paper. So it's sort of interoperable and it's portable, right? So it's very, very convenient for me to how I want to manage my identity. For example, if I lose my device, I can basically port this identity to a new device. So it's very portable. User experience, because obviously now I am in control of my information, and I have this control with respect to what I'm sharing with whom. With one identity, I'm able to basically access different services. So it basically improves the user experience massively. The third thing is accuracy, because the data is in certain cases it's being directly received from the issuer, or basically the platform is verifying any information that is being added. So the accuracy of the information is very, very high, and it's very, very consistent. And then I think we have seen examples, right, where there are people who have different names on their different ID cards, right? Or they have different addresses on this ID card. So this technology solves that problem, right? So it's about consistency as well. And lastly, it's private, right? So you have very strong data ownership and privacy. And eventually you will be able to monetize it as well, because now what we are solving the question of data ownership. So we have established that the user is the owner of the data, so they will be able to monetize that in the future. But let's look at it from the organizational standpoint as well, right? Because our model is B2B, right? So from an organization standpoint, basically it's driving efficiency, first of all, right? So we are improving the ways through which organizations can onboard and manage their customers, their users, and their employees and citizens. So it sort of basically make it very, very efficient, and they can also basically become sustainable by basically going paperless. It's verifiable, right? So the organizations can verify the information that they are receiving on the fly. They don't have to basically employ third parties to do the verification, which sometimes take days. I remember when I moved to UK and when I opened my first business account, it took me 40 days to basically open that bank account. You can imagine basically how cumbersome that process is. So now with this, verification can happen in a matter of seconds, and then you can enable your customers to start using your services. And it's about trust, right? It's trust is the key factor. If you are able to basically build trust with your customers or your users, then nothing better than that, right? Because we are living in a world where there's a huge lack of trust, and also because of pandemic, all people are basically being pushed to use digital services, and they are basically being exposed to cyber frauds. So if as an organization, if you are able to basically create a platform which is very secure and frictionless, so you are able to build a trust with your customers, which basically gives you which gives you basically an edge with respect to your competition. And lastly, compliance. So I remember that I was working with this large organization in UK, which is a multi-billion-dollar global organization. And one of the challenges they were facing was that if they have to become compliant with different data protection and privacy laws, they need to spend millions of dollars upgrading their IT systems. And if they don't do it, if they are not compliant, they can basically be fined a few percentages of their revenue, which could be into billions. So it's about how do you ensure that from day one you are compliant. So EarthID can enable that compliance aspect also. Moving on, let's talk about technology a bit further, right? So obviously, when we look at the system architecture, so it relates to what we have discussed in the past also, that obviously we are talking about different user interfaces, right? The user interfaces with respect to whose identity or who's the subject of the identity, right? Right now we are talking about individuals, but we have created a platform, a composable architect using a composable architecture, where the same platform or the same framework can be used for the identity of autonomous vehicles. You can basically talk about IoTs, you can talk about smart devices, you can talk about organizations, you can also talk about animals. So we are basically engaged with an organization in Latin America, where they're talking about the identity of basically livestock, right? So this is where using the same technology, depending on what industry you are in or what business challenge you're trying to resolve, you can use the same framework. And obviously what we also talk about different wallets. So in this example, we are talking about, in this architecture, we have showcased the mobile wallet, but we are also basically creating a model where there's a backup of this data in IPFS and other storage models. And then you can sort of sync data across different devices. So it ensures that there's a portability and a recovery mechanism tied to your plan. And then eventually, I think right now we're using Hedera Hashgraph, wherein which obviously it's a third generation DLT platform, which is enterprise grade, which is very secure, very reliable, very cost efficient. And we did a lot of, when we started this EarthID in late 2018 or 2019, we did a comparison with a lot of existing DLT and blockchain platforms, and we realized that this is one of the best. But obviously, having said that, we have created a framework where we can basically work with multi-chain, right? So we are driving interoperability. So as a matter of fact, if we have customers who want to use EarthID identity management solution, the decentralized identity, but they want to basically use some other blockchain because for various reasons they have adopted a specific blockchain. So we are still able to enable that, right? Because we have we have abstracted the underlying DLT in a way that it can be switched. So for example, if you have a use case where or you have already made a choice, for example, you want to basically go with Polygon, or you want to go with Solana, or you want to go with Cardano, or so on and so forth, you can still basically work with us, and you can take this technology and integrate it with your platform of your choice. Now, when we look at from a closer point of view, right, when we have to see how this is going to work. So obviously, I think we have talked about the user interface, but then we also have an issuer interface, and we have a verifier interface, right? Because obviously the user can use this wallet, and this wallet, they can download it from somewhere, and then they can start using it. But obviously from a customer standpoint, from an organization standpoint, how are they going to use this, right? So we have two types of customers. One is the organizations which are going to issue the identity, and the second type is the organizations which are going to verify the identity, like banks, employers, and so on and so forth. So and in certain cases, the same organization could be an issuer and a verifier both, right? For example, if I'm applying for a driving license, I need to first provide some, let's say my birth certificate, that needs to be verified, and then only after that, and after basically verifying my address, I get a driving license, right? So in that sense, it's sort of life cycle where some of my information gets verified, and then only I get a new identity. So issuance and verification can actually happen together by one organization. But for argument's sake, we are talking about two different organizations where one is trying to do issuance and second is trying to verification. So we have APIs, right? So we have APIs with respect to how do you interact or integrate with the backend, right? With respect to the SSI layer or the decentralized identity layer, right? So we provide APIs for enabling this, and we have nodes, right, which represent specific organizations. These nodes they could be single tenant, they could be multi-tenant, or they could be in certain cases they are optional. For example, from verification purposes, you don't necessarily need a verifier node. You can basically still receive information from the user and verify it. So we have APIs and SDKs to enable this. Moving on. From a workflow standpoint, right? So obviously we have understood, right? There's a user app, which is the wallet. Then we have issuer interface. Then we have verifier interface. Then we have the issuer node, and then we have the verifier node, and then eventually there's this EarthID's SSI layer. So there are different execution steps. This diagram basically depicts how this works, right? In terms of what are the different processes with respect to how the nodes are set up, how the keys are created, how the verifiable credentials are issued, how they are received, and then how they are verified. So I'm not going to go in a lot of detail with respect to this, but this information is basically available, right? In terms of how a process would look like, right? In terms of you as a customer, what are those integration points, and how are you going to basically orchestrate this end-to-end journey? And we have APIs which can be sort of used to enable this process end to end. Now let's talk about some of the advantages of EarthID, right? Because obviously there are other SSI platforms also in the industry. And as I mentioned, right, when we started this company, we did a lot of research with respect to what do we want to achieve, right? What are those underlying technologies that we want to use? What are those features that we want to add? And what are those problem statements that we would focus on, right? And that is where, if you look at the different features that the various different SSI providers would have, right? We did a basic comparison. We have shown basically the comparison between Sovereign and EarthID, because with our experience, and we have a lot of experience in this space, we have seen that a lot of organizations, a lot of customers initially use Sovereign because it was providing a framework which can be which others can build their solution on, right? But our realization was there are massive challenges with respect to how the entire architecture works, and that is where we decided to basically go on our own way and build something from scratch. And that is where we made some certain strategic decisions as well, right? So one of the simple ones is basically what is the blockchain or the DLT of choice. So obviously for Sovereign, it's Hyperledger, but there are other SSI providers also which are using Ethereum and so on and so forth. And very recently, even Polygon has announced their Polygon ID, right? So in that sense, there are a lot of choices. But we went with Hedera Hashgraph because of how it works, right? First of all, I think it has a strong governing model. So there are a lot of reputed organizations which basically govern the platform and which ensure that it's stable and it's maturing at a very rapid pace. And also it's about scalability, it's about security, it's about cost. What we have seen is like we have customers who have basically tried other platforms like Sovereign, various Sovereign stewards, but they have realized that while they can do POCs and pilots with that technology, but they have to do a production like a solution, they struggle. They struggle with respect to scalability, they struggle with the cost of technology, and they struggle with basically the overall value proposition. So that is where EarthID has this advantage, because we have made a choice to go with Hedera. But as I mentioned, we are also in process of basically assessing other types of blockchain, because now in last 4 years the ecosystem has changed. There are a lot of new choices, and one of the other things, still Hedera is our platform of choice. But then what we have also realized is a lot of customers basically come there with their own expectations and inclinations and decisions. So we want to basically support them with their platform of choice. then it's about basically the type of platform that we are using. It's about scalability and throughput. It's about cybersecurity. For example, Hashgraph is resistant against DDoS, Sybil, and spoofing attacks, which basically ensures that EarthID is basically highly secure against cybersecurity threats, right? Then it's also about who are running your validator nodes, right? So in case of Sovereign, a lot of blockchain related companies are running them, right? But then if you look at if you look at Hedera, their nodes are being run by global organizations which sort of represent authority in a given given industry sector. Then it's about selective data disclosure. I think some of the comparisons are equal, but then we can talk about zero knowledge proof, where the capability of EarthID with respect to zero knowledge proof is quite high, because we keep innovating and we are working with our partners. We are not saying that we are building everything in house, but we are ensuring that we are innovating in the right direction with the help of our partner and customer ecosystem. And then we can talk about wallets, right? So we are ensuring the wallet that EarthID is building, they are of utmost quality, and we are also focusing on ensuring that we are not creating a digital divide, right? Because let's say if we build a wallet which can only be run on a latest smartphone, then we are sort of creating a digital divide, and most of the people would not be able to use it because they cannot afford an expensive smartphone. So this is where our focus is, that we are able to create a multi-channel wallet which can basically meet the needs of various different demographics. And then there are a lot more other things, right? So, and then we are happy to basically share some of this information if anybody is interested in. And we would love to also basically see that what are the use cases that this community is working on, and then how can we sort of help them. And on that note, I think we can do questions if there are any. Are there any questions from the audience? Monica, is there a way to basically interact with the audience to see if they have any questions, or do you want us to just continue and?
Amit, you can continue with the question answers. Means if you know few of companies or startups may have this question, so you can continue with those questions. So I don't see any questions being asked so far, so we can do that.
Okay, sure. So Rahul, at this point in time, is there anything that you would like to basically add with respect to, because you're working with a lot of organizations across Web3 and Metaverse space? Are there any questions or challenges that you foresee or that you have faced, which we can basically talk about here?
नेमका मला प्रश्न विचारला तिकडे म्हणून मी हे केलं.
Rahul?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so as you said, right, I'm working with a different technology and even different space, right? So most of the people see the challenge with respect to the privacy and the data, right? So basically everyone data privacy, right? So because even in the metaverse or any other application which is building on a Web3 space, right, either it's related to the metaverse or it's a game or anything else for that matter, right? So even the token related product. So everyone has a data which is there available on the blockchain smart contracts, and apart from the smart contract, there are the data which is sitting on the IPFS and other platforms as well, right? So everyone is facing that how they can onboard a user with the digital onboarding, because if you are talking about the Web3 solution, then it's important to that login and then authorization should be also the Web3 compatible, right? So first thing, and the second is how user can basically access their data which is on the decentralized file system, all right? So they need some mechanism or identity based solution so that we can verify the different kinds of user and then grant access, right? So that access authorization level is needed, and that is the one issue with the metaverse also, that's a big concern as of now. But I think the solution on the self-sovereign side, SSI and the digital identity space can solve that problem. So that can be the one side. Apart from that, maybe there obviously there are many more use cases, but with respect to the EarthID or the with respect to SSI, this is the main I think.
Right, right. No, I totally agree with you. I think Rahul, you have highlighted a very strong point with respect to, I think, the privacy, because when we talk about EarthID, right, so we are focusing on basically the privacy, because I think one of the things that we have realized is that when we talk about the blockchain industry, right, it started with the premise of privacy, right, in terms of like the ownership, correct, and then it's about privacy. So we talk about anonymity, because we want anonymity in certain transactions, but we want privacy in certain others, right? So anonymity is that you don't want to share anything, but you are still able to basically do certain transactions. Then you talk about privacy, where you want to do a transaction, but you are happy to share only limited information. For example, let's say if I'm trying to basically buy age restricted goods, so there I just want to basically verify my age, but in certain cases I want to basically prove my address, or I want to do my KYC. So that is where basically the privacy, and that is where the selective data disclosure comes in. And what we have also seen is that I think with Web3 space and with Metaverse space, the ownership of digital assets is becoming big and big concern, right? And we have seen in the I think in every few days we see that there would be news that one of the crypto exchanges or maybe NFT platforms are getting hacked, and the data and then assets being stolen. Because I think one of the challenges is that, which people don't realize, is that the custody of keys is very important, right? Yes. So while you are saying that you have bought an NFT or you have bought a Bitcoin, but if your keys are with sitting with Coinbase or with some other platform, so you don't actually have the ownership, because that platform can be hacked, the keys can be stolen, and your assets can be sort of moved, right? So I think that is another area where we are focusing, right? It's about custody. How do you ensure that you are able to create a solution? Because while these challenges are understood within the blockchain industry, but outside the industry, there's a very huge lack of education and awareness, right? So how do you ensure that people who are new to this space or new to the technology, how can they still participate and still basically ensure that they are not getting defrauded? And actually, we wrote an article, me and Sharad, in Cointelegraph, which was about how do you onboard the next billion users on Web3 space, right? For us to do that, we have to focus on user experience, because we have to make sure that like what payment industry did in India, right? Even a street hawker is able to basically make and receive payments using a basic feature phone. So that is what it's about, right? So it's about how do we create technologies which are able to basically support various different use cases, and also enabling users from different backgrounds with respect to culture, with respect to education, with respect to their financial this thing, they are able to participate and benefit from and then that is what I think the key focus of EarthID is as well.
Correct. One more just point I want. So apart from this, the people are in the Web3 space are also facing the issue with the scalability, because there are many solutions, and but in initial days there are more or less the POCs, right? But with respect to the the production, people are facing the issues with the scalability and with the TPS, right? So that's the one more I think the problem with this. So and that's why I think you mentioned that EarthID is using the header hash graph because of these two factors, right? Because they have the TPS of high TPS and the cost-effective solution, right? With respect to the SD. So
absolutely. No, I think I just want to extend that point as well. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier also, right? So we have a few customers, and obviously I cannot name them, but they did basically a few experimentations and pilots with other similar providers, SI providers, but they have realized that while they can do experimentation, they can understand the use cases and how they can be enabled, but when they have to take it to production, they struggle, right? Because obviously there are scalability challenges, there are cost challenges. Because while you are doing a POC, you might not be too much worried because somebody else will be able to absorb your cost because there are a lot of grants happening. But when you have to actually take a solution live to production, that is where I think cost becomes exorbitant, because the way, for example, let's say take an example of Ethereum, right? So there are SSI providers who are using Ethereum, but the cost of Ethereum transaction gas is so high that it becomes, it becomes exorbitant, and it sort of becomes a showstopper.
Correct. And
Right.
even the Ethereum mistakes for the confirmation, it takes time, right? So if you create a VCs or VC and you need it immediately, right? So right after creating a VC, you need to share with someone. You can't do it right immediately because it takes a lot of time to create a VC actually, right? So with respect to Ethereum, it's not on the fly. You can do it, right? And there are the use cases where you need it on the fly, right? You create it and you need to immediately share it. So if you have such kind of use cases, then the blockchain like Ethereum is not feasible because because it takes time, right, to for the consensus.
Correct. I think this is where we are at EarthID. We are also interested in experimenting with a few layer 2 protocols, right? Because I think they are sort of solving the problem, and that is where we are also talking to likes of Polygon, right? Because they are sort of solving the problem of scalability and cost, but we need to figure out whether they are fit for purpose with respect to the customer needs, right? So this is where I think the way we are looking at this, and I think Rahul, you know, this is that we are looking at two layers, right? One is the wallet or the user interface layer, which is about innovating with respect to how we can improve user experience, security, and so forth. And then the backend, right, which is with respect to, I think, the underlying DLTs and blockchains, and looking at how can we support more platforms so that we can give different choices to our business customers.
Okay.
Fine. I think we are good for now. Monica, I think we can conclude the session. I have provided the contact information here. So if anyone from the audience or from the startups from this particular cohort, if they want to reach out to us with respect to any technical or functional questions, or with respect to how they can sort of do a POC with us, or if they already have a business use case and they want to sort of help taking that forward, so we are happy to do that. Okay. Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you.